Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into a book that definitely gets people talking, Why We Want You to Be Rich. It's that collaboration between Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki.
Yeah, and you ask us to really pull apart the core message, figure out what makes these two, very successful guys tick.
Exactly. So the plan isn't just to summarize. We want to dig out the key insights, maybe even the things that surprised us, and, get a handle on their thinking.
And right off the bat, what hits you is this shared concern they have. It really drives the whole book.
Which is?
Well, despite coming from different worlds, Trump with real estate, Kiyosaki with financial education, they were both really worried about the middle class shrinking.
Ah, okay. Not just in the U.S., right?
No, they mentioned other G8 nations too. They saw this trend towards basically a two-class society. You're either rich or you're poor.
And their book is meant to be the antidote.
Sort of. Their stated goal is to give people the knowledge, the right kind of knowledge they believe, to actually become rich, to be part of the solution, I guess.
Yeah, it's quite a pairing. Trump, you know, billionaire, developer, TV personality.
And Kiyosaki, the rich dad, poor dad guy, who's changed how millions think about assets and liabilities.
It is fascinating they found this common ground, despite the different scales they operate on.
Absolutely. And just to set expectations, we're not really here to give investment tips based on this.
No, definitely not.
It's more about getting inside their heads. Why do they think they succeeded? What are their core beliefs about money, business, investing? It's about their perspective.
And that perspective really clashes with a lot of standard financial advice, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. They pretty much take aim at the usual work hard, save money, invest long-term in mutual funds, diversify.
The mantra we all hear.
Right. They basically say, look, that might work if you want to be middle class, maybe comfortable. But if you want to be rich, different game, different rules.
They even question mutual funds pretty directly, don't they?
Yeah.
Like transparency issues.
Yeah, they raise concerns about fees and whether you really know what's going on under the hood. It sets the stage for their alternative approach.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. How did this actually happen? How did Trump and Kiyosaki end up writing a book together?
Well, the book explains that Bill Zanker, founder of the Learning Amex, actually brought them together. He proposed the idea.
Interesting. Matchmaker.
Kind of, yeah. And apparently when they met, they hit it off because they realized they were seeing the same troubling signs.
Which were?
The rich getting richer, obviously, but also America getting poorer, the middle class disappearing, high-paying jobs moving to China and India, pensions becoming unreliable.
The shaky ground of Social Security and Medicare, too, right?
Exactly, all these big systemic issues.
And Trump had already been writing about some of this stuff.
Yeah, apparently in his book, The America We Deserve, he'd touched on similar economic concerns, even things like terrorism and national debt. So it wasn't like these ideas came out of nowhere for him.
So it wasn't just a random pairing. They had this shared anxiety almost.
You could say that. And a core part of their diagnosis is something they call the entitlement mentality.
Okay, what do they mean by that?
It's this idea that too many people just expect the government, or maybe their employer, to fix their financial problems for them.
Right. And their answer is?
Their answer is pretty blunt. Don't wait for someone else. Become rich yourself. Solve your own problems. They see wealth creation as a form of taking personal responsibility.
That ties into Kiyosaki's definition of intelligence from his Rich Dad, doesn't it? Something about solving problems.
Exactly. Intelligence is the ability to solve problems. So financial intelligence is the ability to solve your money problem.
It's a powerful frame.
Yeah.
And they both hammer home the need for financial education.
Oh, constantly. They really see poverty not just as a lack of money, but as a lack of knowledge about money.
And they put their money where their mouth is, right? Donating time, book profits.
Yeah. They mentioned dedicating resources to promoting financial literacy. It's central to their message.
They also talk about vision, connecting it to financial success.
Right. The idea is that financial literacy allows you to see opportunities that others miss. It changes your perspective, your vision of what's possible.
Okay, so shared concerns, big emphasis on financial education. Let's get into the mechanics. How do they actually think differently about money and investing?
Well, a really key difference they highlight is active versus passive investing.
How do they define that?
They argue the rich invest to win. They're active, they look for control, for influence over their investments, whereas they see the middle class often investing not to lose.
Ah, like the defensive strategy, mutual funds, diversification.
Exactly, playing defense rather than offense in their view.
And this connects to that 90-10 rule they talk about.
Yeah, the idea that roughly 10% of the people control 90% of the wealth. It applies in lots of areas, they say. And they're very clear. They play the money game to be in that 10%.
And they actually enjoy it. It's not just a chore.
They emphasize that. They find the process, the deal-making, the strategy, fun. It's a game they want to win.
To explain these different mindsets, they use Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant.
Wait, that's crucial. E for employee, S for self-employed or small business.
B for big business owner, and
Yeah.
I for investor.
Right. And their whole argument is structured around moving towards the B&I side. While you can make money in E&S, they argue the real leverage, the favorable tax laws, it all benefits the B&I quadrants much more.
And our school system, they'd say, mostly prepares us for E&S.
That's their critique. Get good grades, get a good job, E, or become a highly paid specialist like a doctor or lawyer, S.
But not necessarily how to build a system or make money work for you.
Precisely. That requires a different kind of education, often self-taught or through mentorship, they argue.
This also flips the script on budgeting, doesn't it? It's not just live below your means.
No, they're much more focused on expanding your means. Find ways to increase your income, then use investing to build wealth, and, importantly, enjoy your life. It's not about deprivation.
Which leads to their view on debt. It's not all bad in their book.
Definitely not. They draw a very sharp line between good debt and bad debt.
Good debt being.
Debt used to acquire assets that generate income. Think leveraged real estate that cash flows. Bad debt is consumer debt, stuff that just drains your wallet.
And they argue banks actually prefer lending for certain assets.
Yeah, they make the point that a banker is often happier to lend against a solid piece of real estate than a portfolio of mutual funds, because the real estate is tangible, something they understand and can potentially control.
Which brings us back to their skepticism about mutual funds for the long term.
Right. They worry about hidden fees eating away returns over decades and the lack of control and transparency. Plus, diversification, while safe, inherently limits your upside, your leverage.
Leverage seems like a huge concept for them.
It's absolutely central, and not just financial leverage, borrowing money.
Right, you mentioned OPM and OPT before.
Other people's money, other people's time, leveraging other people's expertise, their ideas. But the ultimate lever they keep coming back to is financial education, knowing what you're doing.
Okay, so if thinking differently and using leverage are key, what about the process of learning? Education, mentors, experience.
They really value learning by doing and learning by teaching. Kiyosaki talks a lot about mentorship, finding someone who's already succeeded and apprenticing under them.
And they maintain that traditional school doesn't really cut it for financial smarts.
Pretty much. They see it geared towards creating employees, the E quadrant. They feel it often lacks real-world financial relevance.
So experience is king.
Experience combined with education. You need the theory, but you absolutely need to get out there and do things. And, crucially, learn from your mistakes.
Which schools often punish, right?
Exactly. They see mistakes as essential learning tools. Kiyosaki even brings up the cone of learning. You retain much more by doing or simulating, like playing his cash flow game, than just by reading or listening to lectures.
It's a very hands-on approach.
Okay.
Drilling down further, what are some of the core principles they outline for actually getting rich?
A big one is think big. Expand your context, your vision. Don't limit yourself. And think about expansion in your ventures.
They also talk about combining common sense with uncommon thinking.
Yeah, like taking basic principles but applying them creatively to find new opportunities or solutions. That's where innovation happens, they suggest.
And they make this bold claim that getting rich can be predictable, not just risky.
Well, predictable once you understand the key elements. Leverage, control, creativity, expandability, the ability to scale, and predictability within certain markets or systems. Once you grasp those, they argue, the risk decreases significantly.
The biggest risk then is
Doing nothing, not acting on what you learn. That's the real gamble, in their view.
focus is another big one, right? F-O-C-U-S.
Follow one course until successful. Kiyosaki's acronym. Avoid getting distracted, jumping from one thing to another. Master one path first.
And learning from defining moments, both good and bad.
Absolutely. Reflecting on those key experiences is critical for growth.
They both use their own lives as examples throughout. What specific lessons did they draw from, say, their parents?
Well, Kiyosaki famously contrasts his highly educated but financially struggling poor dad with his entrepreneurial rich dad. Those contrasting views on money, work, and risk shaped him profoundly.
And Trump.
He often mentions his mother's advice: trust in God and be true to yourself. He presents it as a guiding principle.
What about school? Any positive takeaways?
Kiyosaki admits he wasn't a great student traditionally, but credits one teacher for encouraging his writing. Trump acknowledges Wharton gave him a foundation, but stresses that street smarts and application are what really matter.
Military school seems important for Kiyosaki, too.
Yeah, he talks about learning negotiation skills and humility there.
And sports. Seems like both valued that.
Definitely. They mention learning discipline, timing, trusting instincts, the importance of practice, focus. Trump even notes how much business gets done on the golf course.
Makes sense. And business failures. Are those just swept under the rug?
No, quite the opposite. They both stress that failures are where the biggest lessons often lie. Business is about continuous learning, adapting, and holding on to your vision and focus through the ups and downs.
They also touch on God and money. How do they square that?
They advocate for religious freedom, but also question rigid dogma. They both express faith in a higher power being relevant in business, emphasizing ethical behavior.
Any specific interpretations?
They offer a kind of pro-business take on the golden rule and interpret the parable of the talents as rewarding those who increase their wealth, who multiply what they're given.
So wealth isn't inherently bad in their view.
Not at all. They challenge the idea that wanting to be prosperous is somehow wrong or unspiritual.
Okay, the book gives advice for different life stages.
Yeah.
What about someone still in school?
Their advice is practical. Focus on subjects like accounting and business law, learn about market trends, start thinking like an investor, find your passions, but also don't neglect financial literacy alongside academics.
What if you're an adult but don't have much money saved?
They lay out two basic paths: simplicity, cutting back drastically, or complexity, actively increasing your financial education and activity.
And they recommend.
Complexity. Become a student of money, business, people. Kiyosaki even suggests network marketing as a potential low-cost way to learn business skills and personal development.
And for baby boomers who might be behind on retirement savings.
They acknowledge the world changed from the industrial age rules many boomers grew up with. Adapting is key. Focus on health, wealth, happiness, maybe get a financial coach.
Any specific investment advice there?
They caution against relying solely on traditional pensions or 401ks. They suggest looking into alternatives like real estate or maybe even hedge funds, but always with caution and understanding. Start investing in things you love or understand.
And if you're already rich, what's the advice then?
Keep learning, keep moving, think bigger, celebrate success, and they highlight philanthropy as a major reward of wealth, giving back.
They also spend time on why people fail to get rich, even if they want to. What are the main reasons they cite?
Several things. Growing up in a home where money talk was negative or non-existent.
Right, like a poor mindset passed down.
Exactly. Or working in a job or field that just isn't set up for wealth creation. Not developing what they call your financial genius.
Lack of focus again. Making excuses.
Big ones. Getting distracted, blaming circumstances instead of finding solutions. They really stress cultivating the right environment. Who you hang out with matters.
You need to be around people who support your goals, maybe even operate in the B or I quadrant you're aiming for.
That's the idea. Your environment and associations can either lift you up or hold you back.
So after all this analysis, what's the final pitch, the takeaway message?
It really boils down to just get started. Stop analyzing forever and take action.
But informed action, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Invest in your knowledge first. Learn before you leap with large amounts of money. They say there are no bad investments, only bad investors.
Meaning people who don't understand what they're doing.
Precisely. Find your formula, what works for you. And crucially, figure out your why. Why do you actually want to be rich? Having that strong motivation is key.
So wrapping up this deep dive into why we want you to be rich, the big themes are pretty clear. Financial education is paramount.
Yeah, thinking differently about money, challenging conventional wisdom, understanding and using leverage wisely.
Continuous learning, adapting, the power of mindset, and your environment.
It's a very proactive stance. They really push against passive acceptance of your financial situation.
Okay, so here's something to chew on. Thinking about Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, ESBI, where are you operating right now? Just take an honest look.
And then, maybe more importantly, where do you feel your greatest potential lies? Which quadrant feels like the right fit for you long term?
And if you have an answer to that, even a vague one, what's maybe one small thing, one concrete step you could actually take, like today or this week, to start moving towards that quadrant?
It doesn't have to be huge, just that first step. It could be reading a chapter, making a phone call, researching something, just starting.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
Getting started on understanding your own path to potentially a, well, richer future.